TIAA is on a mission. Why? Because 54% of Black Americans don't have enough savings to retire. So in collaboration with big-name artists like Wyclef Jean, TIAA released Paper Right, new music inspiring a new financial future. With 100% of streaming sales going to a nonprofit that teaches students how to invest. Stream Paper Right now and help close the gap.
This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Home Abstract and Title Company was founded in 1867 and is the oldest company still operating in McLennan County. Home Abstract is comprised of a team of honest, friendly, hardworking professionals dedicated to providing both commercial and residential real estate clients with the highest level of communication and service. Their team is committed to working hard and building and maintaining strong relationships because transactions are so much more than just deals. They are clients, deserving of the courtesy, care, and respect that Home Abstract and Title Company is known for. Visit Home Abstract and Title Company at homeabstract.com.
Cross the Brazos and Waco, ride hard and I'll make it by dawn. Cross the Brazos and Waco, I'm safe when I reach San Antonio.
Welcome back to the Waco History Podcast. We are well down the trail on the Crossroads series that we're doing here at the Waco History Podcast.
It's a well-worn trail.
It
at
is
this point.
There are ruts in the trail, but very enriching ruts, wouldn't you say, Rick?
I think we have worn out this metaphor, and we will continue to wear it out until we're done.
That's right. So we do this thing where we get into a topic and it's just so rich that it becomes 2 episodes. And so this is our second of our entertainment episodes. The first one we did kind of places in Waco entertainment history. And now we're going to do faces in Waco entertainment history. And we wanted to focus really on music because we got into it. There's all sorts of avenues of entertainment in the arts and in theater. But we thought we'd focus on music. And so there was only one guy. There was one guy that we had to bring in for that. Rick, who is it?
Well, we looked far and wide, like you said, and there was an expert that we're like, man, we've got to get this guy. Well, he wasn't available. So instead, we've got Jim Holmes here.
Yeah. 3 times down, you had to do that.
Yes.
The best guy.
So Jim Holmes.
I'm in the top 10 at least.
Yes.
Right?
Local investment banker and city councilman.
Civil servant.
Councilman.
Yes. I'm Jim Holmes, Waco City Councilman here in Waco, and also an investment banker is my background, financial operations. And I happen to love music. I was raised in a musical family.
Where'd you grow up?
Rural Nebraska.
Which is really known for its music.
It is, especially out in
birthplace of the blues.
Yes, birthplace. Omaha actually does have some pretty good music scene. But my mom played piano, my dad played guitar. We all had some instrument to play. We were all in the marching band and all that stuff. But I played guitar. My older sister played piano, as my mother and father both did. And we were out on the farm just making music. It was a lot of fun.
You had to make your own entertainment.
Well, he did actually in rural Nebraska up there out in the plains.
And then in college, you were part of a rock and roll band, right?
Went through high school, played the trombone in the marching band, and then went to Creighton University and started a little band there. There was a couple guys from Chicago. They were actually accomplished guitar players. I was just sort of learning, and so we had a little rock and roll band and rock and blues, and played a lot of music from some of the people we're going to be talking about today.
And if somebody wants to go to Spotify, what would be the name of that band so they can
the
pull
name
up
of
your
the band?
music?
We had several different names. RT
had to keep changing
we
it.
had one step ahead of the Angry Crowd. We were called Jacks for a while. We were called Bent Axe for a while.
Wow, now that sounds pretty
that was a little
serious. Yeah,
it was. But we weren't technically we were pretty good, but we kind of played what we liked, and weren't playing a lot of the covers. We played a lot of blues and jazz and rock and blues. So
okay,
definitely a kind of a fraternity band, weddings and stuff like that in the greater Omaha area.
Wow. And do y'all still do weddings now?
Yeah, Yeah, I pull the guitar out and we'll play some tunes. from
So
the
so
70s.
fast forward, you find yourself in Waco. This is where you build your professional career, and where did you dive into the scene here in Waco? What got you into music in Waco?
Came down here to go to Baylor Law School,
Yeah.
a long time ago, and then really joined a bank and had a very rewarding career going all over the world in our investment banking deal in Europe and South America and Mexico and Japan and Thailand, all over the place.
Sounds
So-
like a real Crossroads type of career there.
Exposed to a lot of different types of music.
Yeah.
Rick, and really here, just in the last 8 or 10 years, have gotten into the local blues. We'll be talking about that here in this episode, because I like the blues music. To me, is the base of rock and roll music and all different kinds of music. Ultimately, it's kind of the root commonality of a lot of the different music that we hear. And interestingly enough, some of the founders of what was known as blues music, there's kind of a Delta blues, and there's a Texas blues, and there's Chicago blues.
Mm-hmm.
And the founding of this Texas blues, a lot of it was right here in Waco, Texas. So it became interesting to me as time went by, as I lived here in Texas, to kind of discover who some of these folks were and how rich the local music history is when you kind of do a little bit of research.
Yeah, great. Well, I thought, Stephen, it'd be good to maybe start with some of the early faces, the early people we know about that were musically inclined in Waco, and we'll build into this, point where he was just talking about, and let him take us down the journey of how the blues got going here in Waco.
That sounds good. We have told Jim he doesn't have to be comprehensive, so I do want to point out his Explore the Brazos Valley Blues Trail piece that he wrote for Waco Today. And so you can go see a picture of him with a bent axe on the cover of that. But you can hear more about the research Jim has done if we don't get all of it today.
Great.
Thanks for the plug.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, again, you haven't monetized it much,
I gotta
much
figure out
like
how to do
this
that.
enterprise. And we are leaning on Jim's civil service gene rather than his investment banker gene
Right.
to appear on the Waco History Podcast. So if we want to start at the beginning, Rick, who would we start with?
Well,
you think?
when I looked at individuals or looking through the history, early 1800s, the name that kept coming up that people loved having come play at their events, whether they were reunions or weddings or whatever was going on in the community, was Uncle Dan McLennan.
Mm-hmm.
I think we mentioned him.
We have, yeah.
Yeah. He was originally a slave in the Neil McLennan family,
Mm-hmm.
and came here and homesteaded with them. If everybody remembers, Neil McLennan was the first settler in what is McLennan County, and obviously got named after him. Kind of over in the South Bosque River, Hog Creek area, if you're thinking about that.
But a very in-demand fiddle player, I think.
Yeah, so
for
Uncle Dan McLennan, yeah,
reunions,
a
and
natural player.
different events. Yeah.
Yeah, and really, even there's a great Gildersleeve photo. We like referring to some of those photos of one of these reunion events, and there he is, front and center in the crowd. It was written about him. He carried around his fiddle in a flour sack and was always ready to let it go. And his family, his children, also got involved as time went on, and were, they had accomplished. Sounds like. The Holmes family out in Nebraska, right? Everybody could play an
Exactly.
instrument, and you put them together, and you'd get some beautiful music.
Quite similar, because I had a grandfather too that had my uncles and my grandfather had a band back in the early 20s with a fiddle and a banjo and a guitar. And you're right,
Yeah.
there's all different kinds of. And as you read about Uncle Dan, you see that the kind of events that he played at were just like family gatherings, for harvest kind of deals, and that's where people gathered and where people wanted entertainment, and if you could play, you were appreciated.
Yeah. Well, and Stephen, you may not realize this, they didn't have iPhones back then.
Really?
Yeah, no, they didn't have a playlist.
Really?
They didn't have a radio.
I assume
even.
Gildersleeve used an iPhone with all those pictures he took. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a different culture then. I mean, people made their own music, and singing was singing and playing instruments was they had to make their own fun, as we say today.
So one of the treats, listener, we have for you in this episode is we're going to drop several pieces of audio in. So get your Spotify up. You're going to be creating your Waco playlist as we go. If you want, you'll pick up some Waco artists as we go. Unfortunately, we do not have a recording of Uncle Dan.
Yes,
McLean.
No,
that would be special.
Here's another, actually a band, Alessandro's Band. So in the early 1900s, it's referenced a couple times in the handbooks that we've discussed in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So Alessandro's Band, it was a Victor Alessandro Sr. was of Sicilian descent. Not real sure how he ended up in Waco, but it talks about them giving free concerts on Sundays in Cameron Park. So kind of the precursor to the what does the city call that, Jim? The
Brazos
Nights. There, yeah.
Brazos Nights.
Precursor to the Brazos Nights, and also played the Cotton Palace. I found a picture of the whole band. There's about 25 of them. I mean, it was not an insignificant band. And the other thing that came up was once World War II started, en masse, the whole group joined the Army, or the National Guard, I think, and they were all sent down to Marfa to I don't know, entertain the troops. I'm not real sure what kind of fighting force Alessandro's band really was, but and then after that, Alessandro ended up moving to Houston. The family actually, there's a interesting connection later on in history that I'll come back to Alessandro's son, but anyway, early known band here in Waco.
So Alessandro's son is going to reappear in this episode organically. It's going to pop back up again.
Yes, that's a cliffhanger just to kind of keep you excited.
Yeah, so keep
you
listening to find out what happens.
Yes.
So Jules Bledsoe is a name that must be mentioned.
Absolutely.
Did have an episode with Horace Maxfield from professor from Baylor who has done a lot of research into Jules Bledsoe's compositions. He was also a composer along with the singer. One of the things that we didn't talk about, of course, the famous Broadway star known for playing Joe in Showboat, and that song, Rick,
Old Man River.
Yeah. So one of the things we did not do is we did not play some audio in our first episode of Jules Bledsoe. So let's rectify that by listening to Mr. Bledsoe now.
As the old
So what do you think, Rick? What do you think now hearing Jules Bledsoe?
Yeah, I mean, I've got to admit, having lived in Waco all these years, until I was preparing to do this podcast, I'd never gone back and listened to an original Jules Bledsoe version of that song, and so really it grabs you. I mean, he's very talented, and of course, recording audio, I mean, quality and all that stuff was much different then than it is now. So it would have been awesome to be in a live audience as he was delivering that.
Yeah, you just heard a clip from one of the first talkies, and so it's an old clip of Bledsoe from the 20s and pretty rough.
Because I'm sure, man, because he did a lot of opera, his voice, I'm sure, was very strong. It could carry.
Mm-hmm.
He was also, just in studying a little bit about the guy, very accomplished academically. I mean, he could have been, I think he was studying to be a doctor, to do something in medicine before he switched and went full-time into music. But, very talented guy with a connection to New Hope Baptist Church, which is going to be a theme here. I think there's a lot of our artists that have come out of Waco that came out of that church, out of that congregation.
It reminds you how central that New Hope was in the African American community. His grandfather was one of the founders of New Hope. He grew up singing in New Hope Baptist Church, so it is an epicenter of black music in Waco.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a pretty impressive guy. Like you were pointing out, RT, he went to Columbia University and studied medicine. And so he's got a brilliant mind, obviously. He was also in ROTC, so he had a little bit of military background, spoke several languages. This guy could do it all. A composer, he wrote a full opera. Just an amazing individual, as well as a fantastic singer.
Yeah. Unfortunately, life cut short. So in 1943, while he was doing his patriotic duty out helping sell war bonds, he died tragically in that while traveling. I guess he would have been not very old, less than 50. What?
Yeah, 46.
Yeah. 46. Yeah.
The next figure that we've got here that we want to make sure we talk about, and this is another an international. Jules Bledsoe was definitely a national name, but he shapes that character in the original production of Showboat. But William Henry Hank Thompson, the king of Western swing, born in Waco in 1925.
Yeah. So he was so talented that he had his own radio show while he was in high school. He on WACO, he would do the show. I think it was in the mornings, and then go to school the rest of the day.
You know how much I love alliteration. I've been a big fan since way back. So it was Hank the Hired Hand was the name of Hank Thompson's radio show.
Yeah. Do you use alliteration often?
Anytime I can.
Yeah. I commend you for that.
Yeah.
That's great. Like a lot of young men in his generation, ended up serving in World War II. And when he came back after the war, got a slot on KWTX, where he performed and had a band called the Brazos Valley Boys. KWTX did a lot of early programming that I think helped propel a lot of these folks.
So a signature song of Hank Thompson was The Wild Side of Life. And so let's listen to the cut of that now.
You wouldn't read my letter if I wrote you. You asked me not to call you on the phone, but there's something I'm wanting to tell you. So I wrote it in the words of this song. I didn't God made honky-tonk angels, I might have known you'd never make a wife. You gave up the only one that ever loved you and went back to the wild side of life.
Not a lot of good life advice in there, but it was it's a catchy tune.
It's amazing. It's a fantastic tune. I didn't know God made honky tonk angels. You know, that started a whole thing. And
yeah.
And then this guy, you think about his impact, being from Waco here, Brazos Valley Boys, really kind of started the country western genre, and 14 years in a row, #1 country western band. And you think about that in terms of like a Garth Brooks or a George Strait, put those guys together and you'd have a Hank Thompson.
Yeah.
And he kind of developed his sound out of the Bob Wills sound. We'll talk about Gimble here in a little while, but just creating a new sound of country that had the country western swing in it, and also incorporated other styles.
Yeah, they were heavily influenced. I mean, by the blues and by performers from all different cultures, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Another smart guy too. He went to Princeton, and was studying to be an electrical engineer. So I mean, these guys that are brilliant musicians. It's just not, they don't roll out of bed. They're pretty smart people. And they
Unlike
practice.
podcasters.
Yeah, that's right. But you read about this guy's career, it almost seems impossible because some people in Waco aren't even aware of who Hank Thompson was.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And he was so Waco centric also. And I remember seeing Hank Thompson on, I think it was the Hee Haw. Do y'all remember the Hee Haw?
Oh yeah.
He'd have his Gibson guitar that he played had his name like imprinted on the fretboard, Hank Thompson. He was one of the first guys to really create kind of an image around his music too, with the cowboy stuff and the strings and the hat and all that stuff. But anyway, also a great musician, and God made Honky Tonk Angels, became sort of a linchpin to other people's careers too. Kitty Wells recorded a song that was in response to that. Was also a big hit. But anyway, big name in Waco music history.
Right. Yeah, he in the Country Music Hall of Fame. He's a Hall of Famer. It's significant, and also in the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame. So it wasn't just us who thought he was good.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of dittos out there. Yeah. I wish I had seen his last performance was in 2007. So in his 80s, still performing
Here in Waco, right?
Heart at Texas Coliseum. Yeah.
Fair Rodeo. Yeah. Passed away a few days later. So in that same vein, in that same genre for sure, Johnny Gimble. He wasn't born in Waco. He was born in Tyler in 1926. Grew up in Bascom, and he eventually made his way to Waco. But he was a member of Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys. You mentioned them a minute ago, Jim. And Wills himself wasn't too far from being a Wacoan, born in Cossie, Texas.
Yeah.
So not too far from here. And, there's all these guys have a great journey of how they ended up getting into music, right? And we really don't have enough time. I mean, you could dive down and do complete episodes on these individuals.
Oh, sure. And we probably will at some point.
Yeah. So we're cutting out a lot of great stuff. But just to say, Mr. Gimble moved to Waco in 1955. And I love this. He split his time between doing music and running his barbershop over by the Waco VA.
It's amazing.
Yeah, love that.
And this is why after he achieved a high level of technical proficiency in his field, as a 5-string fiddler and a session guy.
Yeah.
And really taking back that Texas swing with Bob Wills, and he was John Gimble was Bob Wills' fiddle man, and it was he's kind of what made Texas swing, because that whole they call it breakdown style of Johnny Gimble's, where he would just kind of do double time playing. He was so good that he kind of created his own style, and kind of took off a while and ran the barbershop. It always amazes me to consider that.
Well, it's probably like we think of today, professional athletes. 30 years ago, they couldn't make enough as a professional athlete just to be a professional athlete. But, today it's a much different story.
So Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Country Music Hall of Fame, recognized by the two big ones as far as the Hall of Fames for music.
Mm-hmm.
It would be fun. Let's just take a beat here and listen to little Johnny Gimble fiddling around.
Let's dance. Where you been, boy? Oh, I've been to town. And what you been doing? Oh, just fiddling around. For nothing down. My wife makes the payments while I'm fiddling around.
And that was fantastic. And that's from the Honeysuckle Rose soundtrack. If you remember that Willie Nelson movie, Honeysuckle Rose from 1980.
Nice.
John Gimble was one of the, he went to Nashville for a period of time and was one of the most sought after session guys to play fiddle too. So, I mean, he was, again, a technically proficient guy who kind of created his own style. And his son was also, it still plays.
Dick Gimble was instructor at MCC for a long time to help. They've got a commercial music department, which I think is only one of a handful of those in the state that he helped run, and an accomplished musician himself.
And his son is our district clerk, John Gimble.
There you go.
Another public servant. I got to put out the shout out for my fellow public servants.
Yes.
Well, we're getting to the 50s, so we got to give Elvis a nod. Elvis has his own episode on the podcast, which you can check out that. But yes,
hold on, is Elvis from Waco?
Elvis is from Riesel. Most people don't know that.
That's why we're
banana peanut butter sandwiches over.
And you call yourself a historian?
It's around Riesel. I think it's in rural Riesel. Yeah. But Fort Hood, as those of you, the uninitiated, don't know, when Elvis was stationed in Fort Hood, he loved to come up to Waco.
Yeah, the Fadals, right? Eddie Fadal.
That's right.
Where they'd known each other somewhere in his career and connected. I think he actually played a concert here in 1956 at the HOT Coliseum, and that's where he connected with Fadal. Yeah, and it's hard to how big was Waco at the time? You'd think 50,000 people.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
40, 50,000 people, and to have someone coming into town regularly for of that kind of exposure, fame, whatever, because he was already doing movies and stuff by then. Right? Yeah. I'm sure that was. Create a lot of buzz in Waco.
I bet.
I will say the Crossroads here for me anyway came when, as a city councilman, the short-term rental. It's on Airbnb. Anybody can go stay at Elvis Presley's. In the Fadal house.
That's right. Janice Fadal. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we approved that short-term rental. So just contributing to the music history of Waco,
connected
Texas.
to Elvis.
I'm totally connected.
Yeah. That's great. Well, tell us a little bit about how the blues got going in Waco and some of that history.
Yeah, and as I was saying earlier, when you stay around Waco long enough and you're interested in that genre of music, you realize that the pretty good case could be made for Waco being I like to call Waco the gateway to the Brazos Valley Blues. In competition, when a lot of people think of the blues, they think of the Delta Blues, Mississippi. You know, and there indeed is a good culture of music there. But I would put up the Brazos Valley Blues against the Delta Blues any day. And just
so for the uninformed, what would the differences be? Could you
probably a little more of a country feel, I would say. And I don't know, it's kind of hard to. You got to listen to the music and kind of you can hear the differences between Mississippi and Texas to the trained ear, RT. Anyway, as you spend more time Waco and you see it and read about the father of the Texas country blues is a guy named Blind Lemon Jefferson, who grew up just outside of Waco to the east, actually, a ways, and he's the guy who played. You know, what they did back then is you went and kind of followed and Waco being where it is, you followed the cotton harvest from south to north along the Brazos River, and Waco is the center of cotton, as we all know, back in the turn of the century, and as that came through Waco, as the whole harvest moved from south to north, buskers and people entertained folks who were bringing their cotton to market.
Right.
Waco was the biggest cotton market in Texas, so a lot of musicians made money being here in
you got to follow where the people are, and
Absolutely.
that makes sense.
Absolutely. And Blind Lemon Jefferson was one of the first people to record for a national recording. And his music he was great technically, a very proficient musician. And he came through Waco, and there are stories about him coming through Waco on the interurban railroad to Dallas to record up there. And again, just a great composer. Matchbox Blues, Black Snake Moan, and See That My Grave Is Kept Clean are some of his more memorable songs. And a lot of people recorded them too. Bob Dylan, the Beatles, a number of people recorded.
Wow.
The more Waco guy that I like to talk about, and I don't think we recognize him enough, is a guy named Mercy Dee Walton, who was born in 1915. He was a piano player and a songwriter, and he raised in a farming family, and he also played at, they called 10-cent house parties and country suppers in the early 20s and 30s. He moved to California to record what eventually became a classic in the blues genre, One Room Country Shack. That was a top 10 hit in 1953, and now a blues standard. And the cool thing about Mercy Dee Walton, when you try to figure out where he was raised here in Waco, his last known residence was 921 South 2nd Street. And in that part of town, homes were torn down to make room for Baylor.
Yeah.
And Baylor University, if you go to where that 921 South 2nd Street was, it is the home of Glennis McCrary Music Building.
I was about to say that puts it right close to which is better because right across from it was the engineering building, and that wouldn't have been a good story.
No poetic symmetry there at all. So
that's really interesting.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah, we need a plaque there. We need
that would be. I would lead that charge.
Yeah. Well, let's listen. Since you mentioned it, Jim, it's such a blues standard. Let's listen to a little bit of One Room Country Shack now.
Sitting here 1,000 miles from nowhere in this one-room country little shack. Sitting here 1,000 miles from nowhere in this one-room country little shack. Lord, my only worthy procession is a raggedy old 11-foot cotton sack. every night around midnight. Peoples, I just can't sleep no more. I wake up every night around midnight. Peoples, I just can't sleep no more. Only crickets and frogs to keep me company, and the wind howling round my nose.
The piano playing on that is just amazing. The intro to One Room Country Shack is an amazing.
Now, some of these, as we're listening to some of these clips, like I found good stuff on YouTube of Gimble playing, you know, on Hee Haw or other shows. Do you are some of these artists you're talking about, Jim? Can you find clips of them actually playing?
No, I mean the trouble with the blues kind of condition, I'll say, is a lot of these guys, you know, had some very proficient, again, very good musicians, but they had their flash in the pan, but they didn't make a ton of money.
Right.
And so they most of these now vinyl, you know, records or acetate. If you go back to the 20s and 30s, you can definitely get their music. Very little video of these guys.
Yeah.
And I'll just talk about two more. And the second one is another blind guy, Blind Willie Johnson, who's just down the road in Marlin, Pendleton. And this guy kind of, again, was a pioneer in the blues field in more of a gospel. And that's a whole other genre we can get into. I know Bob Darden over at Baylor is the most brilliant guy on the planet about that stuff. But this guy kind of was a crossover guy, blues, gospel. And he was known to have been in Waco, too, during cotton harvest.
Right.
Primarily was down in Marlin, but would come up here while the cotton harvest was going on. He is famous for a song called "Dark Was the Night, Cold Was the Ground," and that song, that clip, was put on the Voyager spacecraft. They picked 27 songs that they felt represented.
Now, don't assume everyone here knows what the Voyager spacecraft is.
See, it's out there, a long ways away.
It's
past Pluto now, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was in the 70s?
Yeah, late 70s.
I think the first Star Trek gave us the answer to what happened to the Voyager Starker.
Now you're giving references that are no one's going to know. So, but yes, it was a mission to send a satellite out there into deep space.
And learn everything.
And basically give signposts. So that's the one where the famous Leonardo da Vinci guy, man with his arms out.
You know, you're making a gesture that they can't see. This is a podcast.
Huh. Okay. I'm glad you told me that. All right. So
I'll go over two other guys right quick. Then one of them is from Downsville, right down the street, South 3rd Street.
Yeah.
Tomcat Courtney. And I actually did get to meet this guy.
Oh, wow.
He was at the age of 92.
Oh, my goodness.
He was still gigging in San Diego once a week.
Wow.
At the Proud Mary Lounge. And just a good guy. And he was very interesting to talk to, and told me all about the history of his experience in the blues field, and was really a leader in moving this. A lot of folks that weren't finding jobs here in Texas were moving to Southern California, as Mercy Dee Walton did, as did Tomcat. But the interesting thing about him, he still has family back here in Waco, and his sister belongs to the church out there in Downsville. I got to visit with her too. His father was one of the people who died in the tornado that were 70 years ago.
Yeah,
this week, I think.
Yeah, and
his name is on the plaque down there in downtown Waco. Anyway,
yeah.
And the last guy I'll talk about, and the reason I bring him up is Classy Ballou, who also passed away in these last 2 years. It's a shame, really, because we're going to talk about Billy Joe Shaver, Classy Ballou, and Tomcat Courtney all have passed in these last 2 years, and some really great Waco musicians. But Classy was actually born in Louisiana, but called Waco home since the early 60s. And he was the band leader at Walker's Auditorium, which
we talked about last episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
which, as you know, all the great blues players and came through. B.B. King, Ike and Tina Turner, Otis Redding, all those folks came through there. And he was the head of the house band there. Just a really cool guy. And was happy as a councilman to have a classy Ballou day. I think we actually did it twice. Just a gentleman, and the guy could play anything. He was technically a great Zydeco player and blues player, but at his concerts, he just did requests. If you wanted him to play ABBA, he would play ABBA, which was a shame. As a technical good blues, I was always disappointed when somebody wanted to play Beach Boys or something. But anyway, those are a few of the blues guys right here in Waco that I think contributed to the history of the genre and really makes Waco what I would call a gateway to the Brazos Valley Blues.
Wow, I like that. And you've got a great, if the listeners can find your article, there's a great map that you show that Brazos Valley and show pictures of all these folks up and down the Brazos.
Yep.
And it is interesting to think back, tying this into the Crossroads and history of other things, in the cotton culture that pervaded this area, right? Because the cotton was mainly grown in the bottomlands along the river.
Yep.
So probably very similar to the Mississippi Delta. I mean, just that the concentration of talent just happened to be there because of these other factors.
Absolutely. And the hotbed of gospel coming together with country, coming together with a little bit of rock and roll, and it just made the Texas country blues. It was that very pathway.
Right, right. Okay, let me take us to a completely different genre real quick.
Okay.
Waco Symphony Orchestra.
I wonder what happened to Alessandra's son. But I was wondering, you keep going. You keep going.
Okay, so
Forget about that.
Well, the beginnings of the Waco Symphony Orchestra, I think, are interesting. There was an immigrant, Max Reeder, who came to Waco in 1939. He was escaping fascism in Europe, and he was an accomplished conductor in Europe, but didn't really have a gig here. Well, he somehow knew the Steinway family and
The piano people.
And they told him, we sell more Steinway pianos per capita in Texas than anywhere else. So that led him to come to Texas. He had some names and some connections, just taking a train through Texas, just trying to find a place to land. Gets off the train here in Waco, recognizes a name on a door that was one of the names of his on his list of people to connect with. And so he connects with this lady. I can't remember her name now, but she quickly got together her friends and other patrons who were really excited about this opportunity. Got the music department at Baylor. They pulled together an orchestra, and Max Reeder led this orchestra, and it was a huge success. Everybody liked it. 1,500 people show up for this first concert. Incidentally, he also, someone from San Antonio, hears that. They ended up hiring him as their conductor in San Antonio. So from what I can tell, he kind of did double duty. He would lead it here, lead also in San Antonio. And but eventually in 1950, he had some health issues. He actually ends up passing away. The Waco Symphony Orchestra here in Waco has a little bit of a gap, so it's not again until 1963 that they actually pull together the orchestra again with a new conductor, and then it's kind of continued on to today's organization. But you're probably wondering where Victor Alessandro comes in. I've been
preoccupied with that.
Yeah, it's come up a couple times. Well, he was actually born in Waco, junior. Senior was the leader of the band back in the 19-teens. While he was in Waco, he had a son, Alessandro Jr., who became a very accomplished musician, where he studied. And at age 22, he became the conductor at the Oklahoma City Symphony Orchestra, and became an understudy of Max Reeder in San Antonio a few years later. So when Reeder passed away in 1950, Alessandro took over that season, and then became their permanent conductor and was very accomplished. So,
Oh, wow.
Amazing.
of
Yeah.
Waco, and that
Circle of Life.
Yeah.
did some great things.
I don't know how you knew he was going to come up again, but it's like you knew. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
when you write it down
Yeah.
on paper, kind of follow the paper. But anyway,
Well, I'm happy to say that the Waco Symphony Orchestra is still going strong today.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's after a 10-year hiatus, Daniel Sternberg took over for a long time, and then Stephen Hyde became the maestro for I think another 25 years after that. But he
Mhm.
just retired this past season. So we're gonna have a new
right. They've been auditioning
maestro.
people this.
I think they've narrowed it down to 4, and
Yeah.
we should know. But I've been a supporter of that for 25 years, and it's just live music and that kind of music. It's just brilliant. It's just a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's always a fun night when you can listen to some classical music right here in Waco.
Yeah.
Well, another luminary, Waco luminary that doesn't get enough credit, as you were talking about Mercy D earlier, is Tom Wilson. And I think there's been a bit of a revival in the last couple of years. Our podcast, we did an episode on him way back, probably 3 years ago with the series that Keep Waco Loud was doing on Tom Wilson to draw attention to his legacy. But that is Tom Wilson. So when did you discover Tom Wilson, Jim?
I was a big Frank Zappa fan, actually.
Absolutely.
Which was kind of in his maybe third iteration of what all the things Tom Wilson did, and just studying his history is so interesting. And another Harvard guy, another well-educated guy, who just
and
loved
product
music.
of New Hope Baptist Church.
Mm-hmm.
A local guy and a church-going dude. And his father was the choir director, and his grandfather was a college professor.
Mm-hmm.
Went to Harvard, and then I guess the stuff that he did in the 50s kind of interests me. John Coltrane, who was one of the best saxophone players ever,
Mm-hmm.
he helped produce a couple of his albums. And then in the 60s, really seminal recordings with Bob Dylan. And 3 of his first 4 albums were produced by Bob Dylan's first albums were produced by Mr. Wilson. And like a Rolling Stone, you don't connect the two, but and then you go to Simon and Garfunkel.
Yeah, Sounds of Silence. Yeah,
these are like you hear that song
Very
every day.
different sounds. Yeah.
And kind of a folk, and then pop stuff. And then what he did, I would say, in the third part of his career, was the more avant-garde. If you know, are you a big Frank Zappa fan, RT? You are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, back in the 80s when I listened to him, but
he was more of a Moon Zappa.
Yeah. Second generation. Well, yeah, Mothers of Invention. You couldn't get any more different to me than almost all 3 of them. Coltrane being a more pure jazz guy, Dylan and Simon and Garfunkel being a little more pop and folk, and then the Mothers of Invention and Velvet Underground, which is Lou Reed and Sweet Jane, and that to me is just a whole different direction. It shows you how creative this guy's mind was, and really what an entrepreneur the guy was. And he was confident in himself to kind of take chances on these different genres of music, and with a high level of success.
Right.
Just an amazing guy.
Yeah, so I'll get you to put your city hat on. Are there any efforts to kind of recognize Tom Wilson?
We need to.
Okay.
I know that we're doing a lot of work in music right now. You mentioned the Keep Waco Loud effort, and which I'm a supporter of. And anything we can do to celebrate all these musicians and producers. Even this guy wasn't necessarily, Mr. Wilson was more of a producer, but man, he knew music. He knew good music.
Yeah, what a heritage. Yeah.
Yep. Ironically, similar to Bledsoe, he died early at age 47. So no telling if he was able to continue on a full life. What other great artists he would have produced.
And he's also buried here in Waco too. I've always thought that we need to create like a little. I was thinking blues trail, but just Waco musician trail. Not necessarily, where people were buried, but people were
crossroads of sorts. Yeah,
there. That's what I was looking for. I think.
It's been trademarked.
But there's like a dozen places where we could just, people are going to Magnolia, whatever else they're doing here in Waco. Let's open up the music history of Waco.
Well, you know who's not buried anywhere? Willie Nelson.
Oh, yeah.
Still growing strong, but he's got a Waco connection, right?
Yeah, grew up in Abbott, Texas, just north of town, and worked here quite a bit as a youngster, and came back from the military. Went to Baylor for a couple years. So yeah, he's got some strong ties to Waco.
That's a full episode waiting to happen at some point, just on Willie's Baylor years, I would think.
Yeah. You know, when they when you're a freshman at Baylor, they don't really tell you that. They don't. You talk about all the famous people that came through Baylor.
They don't foreground Willie.
No,
they really don't.
And in fact, there's probably a whole group of people here we could probably mention some names and not dive near as deep into, but there's definitely a lot of quality musicians that have spent time here, were born here.
Pat Green is a great one. You can't talk Texas music without Pat Green. And George's Bar is in my playlist. Love some Pat Green.
Vanguard graduate.
Vanguard. You kind of have the bookends here: Pat Green at Vanguard and Wade Bowen at Riker. There's a kind of a competition of a couple of schools here still, as far as trying to raise money for the school. And both of them have been always very generous about coming back to play for school functions.
Oh, that's cool. We've got an old rock and roll hero here in town. Moved here back in the early 2000s. Ted Nugent. You see him around town every now and then.
You talked about going into politics, Rick. You know, if you need a running mate or something like that that embodies your political views, I think a Nugent Tullis ticket would.
I don't think he'd have me. But I mean, he's had a storied career, and it's interesting. He's here in Waco, Texas.
He's done a lot of things, actually. And you go back to his career that started in the 60s in Detroit, obviously, and the Motor City Madman.
Yeah.
But he had a band called the Amboy Dukes that played a number called Journey to the Center of Your Mind. And it was actually the band that I was in. We talked about at length earlier in the
was it Broken Axe?
Yeah,
that was one of Bent Axe.
Bent Axe.
Bent Axe was one of them.
Had a set where we played several Ted Nugent songs back in the mid '70s. So he's a fantastic guitar player.
Yeah.
So as a guitar player, Jim, what's his what is the Ted Nugent style on guitar?
You know, he was always pretty smart about surrounding himself with good writers, and most of his songs are sung by a guy named Derek St. Holmes, as it turns out.
No relation.
No relation.
But
he's very fast. He's very good. He's again, his speed was his.
I see. Yeah.
He played an old Gibson Birdland guitar, and that's kind of his trademark. But when everybody else was playing with Gibson Les Pauls, more of a rock and roll, he stuck with this hollow body Gibson Birdland guitar, which he still plays. And if you're in Waco long enough, and he'll show up at some function and be playing. I saw him a couple of weeks ago playing the Star Spangled Banner. You know, he still does some of that, apart from all of his other political ventures.
Billy Joe Shaver, you mentioned him a minute ago. Talk about an interesting journey.
Yeah, but extremely influential songwriter. I mean, he's a performer as well. But I'm an Old Chunk of Coal has been recorded and re-recorded and re-recorded. I heard a Miranda Lambert version of I'm an Old.
Really?
So it continues to have a new life. But of course, kind of born, right? Waco raised. I remember that, right?
That's right. 1939.
Waco arrested. Yeah, that's another part of Billy Joe Shaver's.
You can mark several of these people on that list.
Maybe let's play just a bit of, how about Old Chunk of Coal?
Sounds good.
That'd be great.
From Billy Joe Shaver. So let's listen.
I'm just an old chunk of coal, but I'm gonna be a diamond someday. I'm gonna grow and glow till I'm so blue, pure, perfect. Gonna put a smile on everybody's face. I'm gonna kneel and pray every day, lest I should become vain along the way. I'm just an old chunk of coal now, Lord, but I'm gonna be a diamond someday.
Yeah, so there we hear his writing and his voice. So we hear him as a songwriter and as a performer.
Yeah. He also had a couple other interesting parts to his career besides music. He did a little bit of acting.
Mm-hmm.
Was in some Robert Duvall movies.
Yeah, I was actually fortunate enough to meet him down at South by Southwest, where that movie, I think it was called Portrait. I directed the Portrait of Billy Joe. And it was actually produced by Robert Duvall's wife.
Huh.
And so we went down to South by Southwest and happened to get in, and went to the after party and got to visit with Billy Joe and Robert Duvall. So it was kind of a cool thing. So yeah, the movie is fascinating. I mean, the guy has led a very interesting life outside of getting his fingers cut off and having some unfortunate deals there. Brilliant writer. Wrote most of Waylon Jennings' big hits were all Billy Joe Shaver's.
A great lyricist. I mean, some of his lyrics are fantastic. I think of Fast Train to Georgia, just the way in which he could turn a phrase, really skilled at turning a phrase.
And Live Forever is another great one. And the Christian message, that he tried to deliver. And that he did deliver is just he was an amazing guy, one of a kind.
Yeah.
And you'd see him playing in Austin at the biggest places with Willie Nelson, and then he did several gigs out at Lakeside Tavern, in front of like 12 people. But just a neat and cool guy.
Well, you talked about the spiritual side of him. One of my favorite things about him is he was the spiritual advisor to Kinky Friedman during his gubernatorial run.
That is,
many gubernatorial runs.
Yeah. I was up at Dallas House of Blues and saw them together. They played together, and I bought Kinky a drink that night, and with Billy Joe standing by there. But it was kind of another underappreciated songwriter, Billy Joe Shaver. And he crossed a lot of genres as well, not just country, but also blues and gospel, and just some, like you say, he turned a phrase so well. He wrote this song called the Corsicana Daily Sun. It's got an amazing chorus and verse to it with the Corsicana Daily Sun. He delivered papers as a kid, the Corsicana Daily Sun. And he turns a phrase about the Corsicana Daily Sun shining down on me. And it's one of my favorite songs of his.
Yeah.
Good guy.
Yeah.
Great.
Now we're getting into more of Rick's playlist with Jessica Simpson and High
Jessica
Five.
and Ashley Simpson. Yes.
High Five.
Well, I just want to point out they were from Waco. They were born in Waco, raised, I don't think they were around Fort Worth or somewhere like that. But yeah, the Simpson sisters, they're from Waco for what it's worth.
Is the city making any efforts, Jim, to...
I'll have to check on that one. I'll have to see where we're at.
And in that same vein, Jennifer Love Hewitt was born in Waco, and
I think she has a few albums out.
Yeah. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Jim, work on that one. I was going to talk about some of the Christian artists from Waco. With Baylor University here, with some of the other resources. There's been a lot of contemporary Christian folks who've come through town, but I think one of them that a lot of people knew was David Crowder.
Mm-hmm.
Was a Baylor student here, helped start University Baptist Church, and then went on to have really top-notch career, and still very active. Ended up moving to Atlanta at some point in the 20-teens, but left a mark here on Waco.
Well, Rick, you mentioned before we began recording, Word Records, as far as a label goes, extremely influential. This term that emerges in the 1970s, contemporary Christian music, in that field, and all sorts of artists having that label having that label based in Waco really made Waco a name in that genre of music.
Right. Yeah, founded in 1951 by Gerald McCracken, who was a KWTX, back to KWTX, sportscaster and a ministry student, and kind of fell into it. Was asked to record some stuff for some youth groups, and then that ended up leading him to kind of producing records and selling them, and was a startup business basically. And ended up getting into selling sheet music and Christian literature, other religious records and educational resources, and grew into a Christian business powerhouse.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people might know when you're going down Waco Drive. So in 1960, they moved to a new building at 4800 West Waco Drive. You know which building I'm talking about? It'd be right over, not far down the road from El Conquistador, on that side of the road towards Highway 6. I can't think what's on the other side of it, but when you look at the front of the building, the awning forms a W.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's word.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's the old word.
Okay. Yeah,
Headquarters.
exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Another name that was part of Word that a lot of people know around here, a person they know, Kurt Kaiser, joined Word in '59 and really helped find and promote a lot of those artists. But unfortunately, Nashville became more and more of a draw for not only musicians, but the business of recording. So eventually they were purchased and eventually ended up being in Nashville, where it still exists today. I mean, it's still an ongoing business, but Word Incorporated.
Yeah.
Well, that's a pretty good slice of Waco, Texas music right there.
Mm-hmm. We talked about this before we started recording. Let's bring it to now.
Yeah.
And of course, there's a lot of artists that we could talk about now. That many of these artists that we've talked about, their career is ongoing and thriving. But you were talking about what it means to be a recording artist now versus what it meant to be a recording artist then.
Right.
You don't necessarily have to go to Nashville anymore if you want to make it in the movie business. And in the music business. And you were giving me a local example.
An artist named Forrest Frank.
Mm-hmm.
That I think he's a former Baylor student, hadn't been out very long, and has a unique style and brand of music that he was part of a band called Surfaces.
Mm-hmm.
My kids know all about him.
Yeah.
And he lives back here in Waco now, and I don't think they play together as a band anymore. But unlike where these guys, early 20th century, I mean, they're traveling around to cotton festivals and playing in front of that. Those are the kind of crowds they play in front of and build a name in kind of more of a regional, local thing. That eventually, once radio got going, radio. They didn't play records at first. It was live music. They were in studio with people playing, and like we talked about with Hank Thompson. I mean, that's how he got started. He played a local show, and then as recording became more and more of a thing, and that technology evolved. Of course, if you're a radio station, it's a lot easier to play records whenever you want to, whatever you want to, than have live talent in the studio. So. As you can see in the 50s and 60s, then records takes over really the radio genre, which is still the main way these artists are going out there, but getting into bigger and bigger audiences.
Mm-hmm.
And as we've all lived through, then that becomes the digital revolution with the DVDs, and eventually, of course, I skipped your favorite 8-track tapes and cassettes, but all right,
still working for me.
Yeah, and then one day we wake up in the 2000s and we've got playlists, and it's all digital. It's a digital world, and that progresses to platforms now like Spotify. Mm-hmm. So back to Forrest Frank. I mean, here's a guy who can record whatever he wants in his home studio. That technology's that accessible for just about anyone, and publish his own music and have his own revenue streams based upon that. You don't have to go to Nashville. You don't have to.
You don't have to tour.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the technology where you can do that sitting in your living room, I guess, and get and record a song digitally. And I know my son does a lot of that. He's also a great guitar player, and he has some stuff out there. I don't want to plug him. I hadn't thought about that, but he does everything.
Don't be ashamed.
Oh, come on. You're a good dad, Jim. Plug him.
I'll fill it in later with that. But anyway, great guitar player and good singer, but he does a lot of his recording at home, and it's you can
so much more accessible and
efficient, and I get it. But it's like always, what's the number one song today? You usually go to the Billboard once a week and you read the newspaper.
Yeah,
it's that one. Well, it's already
Casey Kasem. You listen to Casey Kasem on Sunday night. That's how you know.
Absolutely. Sunday afternoon, the top 40.
That's a historical artifact now. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Jim, anybody we missed that we should have made sure we got into this episode?
I just think you were commenting on the current folks, and the fact we talked about David Crowder and Pat Green, Wade Bowen. Ruthie Foster is also another. I hate to be plugging the blues here, but she's a great blues singer who will actually be in town in a couple weeks at our at some of the venues that are being put on not only by the city but Fiona Bond has a venue that we're doing up on Bridge Street at the Bridge Street Park up there. So Waco has a vibrant music history, and the fact that we're kind of catching some fresh traction, and at the same time appreciating the history of what we have here in Waco, I think is an amazing.
So Jim, where would be the spots now if you wanted to go hear good live music in Waco, Texas? Where are you going to go?
Backyard is a great place. I was just there last Saturday night. Listened to a great local band, of a lot of folks that we know, and an old band called Hourglass was playing. But yeah, there's several places to go. I know Classy Glass. There's a couple Baylor places still, and there are several venues where there used to be none. At least now we have Backyard will come in. Plus the city, like I said, as a councilman and public servant. I want to make sure that we keep the Brazos Nights, the summer festivals going, which celebrates. That's one thing we're not hitting, is some of the Hispanic history of great music, the gospel. I mean, we could go 100 directions with this thing, but a lot of venues that are currently here in Waco that we didn't have 5 or 10 years ago. So I'm happy that we're getting some traction with the music scene.
I want to thank you for the Brazos Nights. I mean, saw Robert Earl Key on his farewell tour last summer, and just fantastic. I mean, the artists that come in with that are fantastic. It's a wonderful free concert. So if you don't know about that, please check it out, because that's a great series that happens every summer. Well, Jim, thanks for coming in, joining us on the Waco History.
A pleasure. I'm glad to be part of this
Crossroads episode, and thanks a lot. Thanks, Rick.
Yep. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Waco History Podcast. Like what you heard? Subscribe, rate, and review our show on iTunes so we can reach more listeners. You can find show notes and info on every episode at wacohistorypodcast.com, and more info on Waco's past at wacohistory.org. Our theme music, used with permission, is Cross the Brazos at Waco, performed by the late Billy Walker. For more info on Billy's music, go to billywalker.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. This has been a Rogue Media Network production.